we will be discussing on nature of psychological data. Now, before we begin, we will discuss some of the important concepts that are related to psychological data, right. Like the first one is data. We will just try to understand the meaning of the word data itself. Data is plural and the singular word is datum. What do we mean by data? By data we mean the unorganized, unformatted or unstructured material that is used for research or that is used for any purpose. So, the nature of this data is it is unstructured, unformatted or it is unorganized, right. The second term that we will try to understand is what is a variable. Now, variable is basically a concept that varies. It may vary from time to time, place to place or from individual to individual, and the important characteristic of a variable is it should be measurable. So, by variable we understand that it is basically a concept, it varies and it is essentially measurable. Like some of the examples that come under variable are height, weight, age, intelligence, marks and so on. Now, once we talk about a variable, the second term that is related with the term variable is a constant. What is a constant? A constant is a concept, but that may not vary. For example, in a research which is done on single gender institution, there gender may not vary. So, here the term gender is treated as a constant. A variable becomes a variable in research context, but in some other circumstance or in some other situation, the same variable may be treated as a constant. Now, we will try to understand the different types of variables, or even before that we will try to understand a word that is also used in psychological data, that is construct. What is the meaning of a construct? Now, construct is a non-observable trait or attribute which explains our behavior. Now, this construct is internal, it is inside the human being which cannot be directly observed, but this explains our behavior. Like for example, intelligence, achievement, all these are constructs. Now, we will try to understand the different types of variables. There is a consensus among experts and then they have broadly classified the variable into two broad categories. One is called as quantitative variable, the other is called as qualitative variable, quantitative and qualitative. Now, what is a quantitative variable? Now, quantitative variable is a variable which varies in amount, right, which varies in amount. Like for example, height, weight, marks, intelligence and so on. Right. Now, this quantitative variable is again classified into two, discrete and continuous. Variable is classified into two, qualitative and quantitative. Again, a quantitative variable is classified into two, discrete and continuous. Now, there are certain other names also associated with the term quantitative variable. A quantitative variable is also called as metric variable, and a qualitative variable is also called as non-metric variable or categorical variable. A metric variable, that is a quantitative variable, is divided into two, discrete and continuous. Now, by discrete we mean that this variable, which is a metric variable, will take values only in whole numbers. Like for instance, the number of books written by an author, or number of chairs, or number of classrooms. Now, in such cases we cannot have the values of the variables expressed in decimals or fractions. Such a variable which will take values only in whole numbers is called as discrete variable. And what is a continuous variable? Now, continuous variable is a metric variable which will take values even in decimals and fractions. For example, heights. You can express the height of an individual as 165.75 or 85 centimeters, right. So, a variable, a metric variable which will take values even in decimals and fractions is called as continuous variable. Now, what is a qualitative variable? Qualitative variable is a variable which varies in kind. Okay. Here the variable is a qualitatively different. For example, gender, religion, community, marital status, all these are examples for a categorical variable or a non-metric variable. Now, having understood this qualitative variable, again a qualitative variable depending upon the number of categories it takes is again further classified into dichotomous or polycathomous. A dichotomous variable is a qualitative variable wherein it takes only values in two categories. Okay, for example, gender. A polycathomous variable is a variable which takes values in more than two categories. For example, religion, community, okay, or nationality. Someone may be an Indian, American or Pakistani, like this. A variable which takes values in more than two categories is called as polycathomous variable. Now, again this classification that we have discussed is essentially based on the nature of the variable. We have classified, we have understood that this classification of a variable is basically divided into quantitative and qualitative. Now, there are also another set of variables, or there is also another classification which is called as independent variable and dependent variable. We will just try to understand the meaning of the term independent variable with the help of an example. Suppose for instance, we are considering children, normal children varying between the age group of 0 to 15 years. And when we are discussing about these children, the height of these children will depend on age. So, here we can understand that age is an independent variable and height is a dependent variable. If height of these children is again going to depend on gender, then gender is again considered as an independent variable and height as a dependent variable. So, age is an antecedent for height. So, this is an independent variable. Independent variable is also called as antecedent variable. Dependent variable is a consequence variable. Now, we will try to understand some other terms like extraneous variable and confounding. Now, what is the meaning of the term extraneous variable? Now, extraneous variables are those variables which are outside the purview of the research and then which are not important for the researcher. For example, if we try to understand the relationship between self-esteem and academic achievement, it is a common observation that there are certain other factors which also influence academic achievement. For example, intelligence, creativity. Intelligence and creativity are also two other factors which influence the academic achievement of children. But these variables are also like independent variables which also influence the dependent variable, namely academic achievement. So, these two variables, namely creativity and intelligence, are termed as extraneous variables. These variables are like independent variables, but which are outside the purview of the research study and influence the dependent variable. Whenever a research or whenever a study is conducted, it should be conducted in such a manner so that the researcher or the investigator should have some control over these extraneous variables and he can see the influence of the independent variable on the dependent variable. If the extraneous variables are not controlled and they also influence the dependent variable, then the researcher will not be in a position to clearly understand what is the influence of the independent variable, selected independent variable on the dependent variable. In such a situation, the relationship between the independent variable and the dependent variable is said to be confounded. That means, the researcher is not in a position to clearly understand what is the influence of the selected independent variable on the dependent variable. And because there are certain other variables which are also influencing the dependent variable. Now we will try to understand the meaning of the term measurement, because we have understood that the characteristic of the term variable itself says that a concept, variable is basically a concept, it should vary and it is essentially measurable. So something which does not vary is not called as a variable. So here we will try to understand the meaning of the term measurement. What is measurement? Now Stevens has defined the term measurement as the assignment of numerals to objects or events according to rules. That means in measurement, the essential understanding given by Stevens is, he is saying measurement means how we assign numerals to objects or events according to the norms and rules that are set by the circumstances or set by the standard institutions. So the manner in which we assign numbers to objects or events is called as, is understood as measurement. In 1946, this Harvard psychologist Stevens has given out a classification on measurement, and according to him there are basically 4 different levels of measurement, or he also calls this as scales of measurement. According to him, the different scales of measurement are nominal scale, ordinal scale, interval scale and ratio scale. The first one is nominal scale. So now we will try to understand what is this nominal scale. Now in nominal scale, what happens is numbers are used as names. For example, when you are watching a football match, you will find that there are numbers written on the back of the players. Now these numbers are basically written to just identify who the player is. Similarly, when you visit a library, you will find numbers, call numbers written on books. Okay? These numbers are only used for identification purposes. So whenever we use numbers in place of names, it is called as nominal scale. Here we cannot do any sort of mathematical operation, we cannot subject these numbers to any sort of mathematical operations. We cannot add, we cannot divide, or we cannot use any statistics on them. So here numbers are only dummy in nature, numbers are only used for identification purposes. So the essential feature of nominal scale is we can identify the object, we can place them into different categories depending upon the nature of the object or characteristic. For example, in a database, when we are entering the data, we give a code 1 to either male or female, and then we give a code to 2 to female, right. So here we are assigning the name number 1. This coding that we do in a database, this also comes under nominal scale. Now we will move on to the next scale, that is called as ordinal scale. Now ordinal scale is the next level of measurement. See, here the name used is levels of measurement. By levels, what is understood here is there is a hierarchy. Nominal is the weakest level, and the next level that is considered is ordinal. That means ordinal is something that is superior to nominal scale. Ordinal scale has all the properties of nominal scale, and apart from that it also has certain other characteristics. In nominal scale we can only assign numbers depending upon the different nature of the objects or characteristics that we are considering. But in ordinal scale, apart from classifying them into different categories, we can here also put them in ascending or descending order depending upon the magnitude or strength of the variable that we are considering. For example, ranks of the students secured in an examination, we can just put them in an order. The student who got the first rank is considered to be superior in comparison with a student who has got a 10th rank. So ranks fall under the example for ordinal scale. The salient feature of an ordinal scale is Like in nominal scale we can assign numbers, and apart from that we can also put them in increasing or decreasing order. Here also we use numbers. So the next level, that is the next in hierarchy, is interval scale. This interval scale has all the properties of nominal, ordinal, and it also has some other important property wherein we can classify the units of measurement into equal spacing. That means in interval scale we have a unit of measurement. Now this unit of measurement is done in a manner wherein there is an starting point and there is an ending point, that is terminal point, and then the distances between the starting point and the ending point, that is the terminal point, are divided into equal spaces, and then each space is called as unit of measurement. This is the additional feature that is found in interval scale, and apart from that in an interval scale we have an arbitrary 0, not the real 0. Later on again we will discuss what is the difference between arbitrary 0 and real 0. So in an interval scale, apart from the properties that are found in nominal and ordinal, there is a separate unit of measurement which is done in an equal space. For example, how do we measure temperature? We measure temperature either by using the centigrade scale or Fahrenheit scale. When we measure temperature using centigrade scale, the minimum temperature that is available in a centigrade scale is 0. This 0 is taken as the temperature that is the freezing point of water, and then the maximum temperature available in a centigrade scale is 100. This 100 is fixed at a temperature where the water boils. So what they have done is they have taken 0, that is the freezing point of water, 100 which is the boiling point of water, and then the distance between 0 to 100, this distance is divided into 100 equal parts, and each part is taken as 1 degree centigrade. So higher the degree, higher is the temperature. 50 degrees centigrade is much higher than 30 degrees centigrade. There is an initial point, there is a terminal point, and then the distances between initial and terminal is divided into different equal spaces. But this need not be the same for all the variables. For example, again when we measure temperature in Fahrenheit scale, the minimum temperature available in Fahrenheit scale is 32 degree Fahrenheit, that is the same temperature, freezing point of water, and the maximum temperature available in a Fahrenheit scale is 212 degree Fahrenheit, that is equivalent to 100 degrees centigrade, that is the boiling point of water. So the initial point is 32 degree Fahrenheit, the final or the terminal point is 212 degree Fahrenheit. The distances between these two, that is 32 and 212, is divided into 180 divisions, and each division corresponds to 1 degree of Fahrenheit. So this is much different from the way it is done in centigrade scale. And if you just see the 0 degree centigrade, this 0 degree centigrade is also one temperature. It is not the absence, it cannot be taken as 0 in the real sense of the term. So 0 degree centigrade is the arbitrary 0 that is taken. So that is the feature of this interval scale. For example, if I say 32 degrees centigrade and if I say 64 degrees centigrade, I cannot say that 64 degrees centigrade is twice as warm as 32 degrees centigrade. I cannot take the ratio. Why? Because the 0 degree centigrade itself is not defined. It does not mean complete absence of the temperature. So we cannot make comparisons. We can make comparisons only between the differences between temperatures. For example, if city A is at 30 degrees centigrade and city B is at 60 degrees centigrade, then we cannot say that city B is twice as warm as city A. Comparisons are not possible in this scale because of arbitrary 0. And the next scale is ratio scale. Ratio scale is the highest in hierarchy. It is the highest level of measurement. In this scale, we have all the properties of nominal scale, ordinal scale, interval scale, and apart from that, in this scale we have a true 0 or a real 0. What is the meaning of a true 0 or real 0? True 0 or real 0 means the complete absence of the trait or characteristics that we are considering. For example, weight. Weight has a true 0. If I say 0 kilogram, it means it is only imaginary, there is no weight there. So, in this ratio scale, we have real 0. This is the distinctive property of this ratio scale, and we can make comparisons. We can take ratios. We can employ all the mathematical operations when a variable is measured in ratio scale. We can add, we can subtract, we can multiply, and then we can also divide. So, this is the highest level of measurement, which is called as ratio scale. So, this is the classification on scales given by Stevens, called as scales of measurement or levels of measurement. So, we will just try to summarize what we have discussed in this session. In this session, we have discussed about the different terms that we come across in understanding the nature of psychological data. Starting from the term data, we have understood the meaning of the term variable, and we have understood the different classifications that are available on the types of variable. Variable is classified as quantitative, qualitative, and we have also understood the different types of variables that are there in research. Like a same variable is called as independent variable, dependent variable, extraneous variables, and we have also understood the meaning of confounding, right. And then we have understood the meaning of measurement. What is the meaning of measurement and the different scales of measurement given by Stevens: nominal scale, ordinal scale, interval scale, and ratio scale. So, if you have any doubts, now you can ask your doubts, or if you have any observations, you are welcome.
Sir, can you give an example of where a ratio scale is used?
Examples for ratio scale. For example, a typist who is typing a letter, and then if we count the number of errors made by this typist, then this becomes an example for a ratio scale. And then if we do this for 4 or 5 typists, whoever is having the maximum whoever is doing the maximum number of errors, that person will be regarded as an ineffective typist. Whereas a typist, if he makes no errors, that person will be having 0 errors.
Sir, in a research study, how can we have control over the confounding variables?
In a research study, confounding is possible by adopting a suitable experimental design or having a most desirable research design. That is the basic concern of a researcher. Researcher, in what he does is, he will try to understand the influence of the independent variable over the dependent variable while controlling all other variables that try to influence the dependent variable. These variables are generally the extraneous variables. By selecting an appropriate research design or by selecting a suitable experimental design, he will have a control over all these identified extraneous variables, and then he will try to study the influence of this independent variable over the dependent variable. For example, if a researcher wants to study the influence of self-esteem on academic achievement, he can have a control over intelligence by selecting all the children who are having the same intelligence, or by selecting children with different levels of intelligence. Maybe he can select 20 children with high intelligence, 20 children with moderate intelligence, and 20 children with low intelligence. In this way, the researcher can also have an idea over what is the influence this intelligence has over academic achievement, and then by doing this way he can have an idea of how the self esteem is influencing the academic achievement.